So I've removed the rear axle from the car now, lowered that down completely on our specialist jig under hydraulic transmission jack power, and that shows the rear axle carrier panel in full for the first time. And now we can move on to taking the fuel tank system out. So when looking at the rear axle carrier panel, you can always see these ones next to the left rear mount. They're quite obvious. But these ones above the right front mount are always hidden. Very rarely are coming out in a visible fashion. So you can see where the bush extremities were. This black mark is the left of the bush and this black semicircle is the right of the bush. Pressing directly onto that spot weld, which helps crack it. And you see, if you imagine the bush was in that way, you'd hardly see anything. Especially looking through all the axle, handbrake cables and everything else, you'd hardly even notice a crack. But you've got a good crack going out that way, trying to go up the vertical. Under there. And then you've got a crack going across to this mounting pin, and then semicircle round, stops about there it looks like, trying to head over to that spot weld there, and you've got another little crack coming down this way going towards the front of the car. So there it is, we finished the strip underneath. Just going to raise the roof into the halfway section. Being a convertible, we need to stop the flap halfway open so we can get to the turrets and get the rear shocker dropped. But that is it, stripped down. So rear axle out, fuel tank out, fuel pipe system, ventilation system and carbon canister, and every single little clip, whether it be a brake pipe clip or a fuel pipe vent clip, everything's removed so that we can assess the floor or the rear axle carrier panel properly, and we can be working, grinding and welding under here, and then obviously painting later on without any risk to the car's safety. No fuel, no interior, all the interior directly above here and the rear seats all removed. So at this stage, with the interior stripped down and the boot stripped down and the borescope camera checking of the internal cavity mounts in the boot and drilling holes in the rear behind the rear seat area, and then the full strip down like this, and the comprehensive vehicle inspection first of all to make sure things are in good order before we start undoing them. We're in about 7.5 hours at this stage, and now we're just ready to start the degreasing work. So we'll probably be spending a good 1.5 hours degreasing all of this into the wheel arch areas, and then making sure that we've assessed the rear axle carrier panel thoroughly. That's what it looks like partway through the degrease. So I've degreased the left hand side of the rear axle carrier panel, going over into the boot floor corner, spreading into the seat panel and into the rear trailing arm pockets over here, and also just started going, you see the blue of the wheel arch, just started going into the wheel arch. So that's what it's like once it's clean, because underneath that dirt there you've got an idea where there's cracks, but you've got no idea where they end and how many there is. Whereas once it's clean, you've got really good pinpoint accuracy for the ends of the cracks, and even small little ones going around the outside of spot welds there. So it's a worthwhile process, time consuming and very messy, but worthwhile process so that we can make sure we identify all the cracks. So there's no easy way to do this, there's no magic fluid, it's just a degreaser, hot water, and a bit of a cliche, but just a lot of elbow grease, just a continual amount of cleaning. Very dirty, not a nice job, but brings up brilliant results, so it's worth sticking with. So we can get the floor, rear axle carrier panel and the wheel arches totally degreased, no dirt, no mud, no oils on it, so that we know that when we do our paint procedure at the final part of the job, we know it's going to stick and adhere to it well and going to last for years and years. So finished degreasing the car now. Centre section is still original, and that's the sort of dirt that we see on the cars when they come in, and then that's how we finish them. Just the degreasing process before we can start checking for the cracks and problems. Gone out into the arches as well. These have come up really nice. And now you get the first chance to look at the decent crack on this right front mount. This is the lower section of it, where the threaded bolt goes in for the subframe bush that sits here. And then that thread inside is about 2 inches tall, I suppose. And then on the inside, around about there, is where they tether that thread to the rest of the panel inside with 2 MIG welds, and that's what we know to be cracked on the inside of the car underneath the back seat panel, because we've done that inspection with a borescope camera earlier on in the process before we started checking underneath. So we need to do some work bottom and top for this one, so that's underneath and then inside the car. And the rear ones have checked out inside the boot okay, so they don't need any internal work, but they do need external work, which is here. This crack needs containing. Then we've got another spot weld failed here. One's starting to move here, and then this one's flexing. A couple of others are starting to flex, but not broken yet. We've got probably a failed one there and another one up there, which is quite common. We see that regularly. Not too much of a split in this seam, which is good. And then on the right rear, we do have a little crack as well. So that's the right subframe mount bolt there. And then we've got a hairline crack on this corner section, which we'll need attending to. That's how we protect the cars. That's a genuine BMW body shop cover, brand new. We use one on each vehicle. So that's designed to touch paintwork and not harm it in any way. So we put one of those on the car first and then cut out a section where we're working. So we've got the entire car covered with a genuine BMW car cover, and then we've also got a special fire blanket draped over the seats, hiding all the dash and the carpet system. And then we've got cardboard covering the rear door cards, and then we've got cardboard sections covering the apertures or opening of the convertible bulkhead. And then we've also got a grind weld fireproof blanket, which is protecting for any sparks, and that's not touching any paintwork because that's on the BMW car cover. So well protected, and that allows us to work inside the vehicle and step in and out without causing any damage or concern to the vehicle. And we can carry out our weld procedure now in the front sections where we have to cut open those bulkhead sections of the convertibles. There we go, just cut open the convertible bulkhead. So this is convertible only. Don't have to do this on the coupe, so the convertibles do take a bit longer, not only for all the protection, but also the extra panel that we have to get through. So no damage to the panel behind, the seat panel. And we need to now get another access panel opened up. There's our inspection hole where we did the borescope check-in, and we found the cracks inside there. And we now need to take a panel out of this seat panel so that we can access the broken MIG welds and the hairline cracks, repair them, weld a covering panel over the seat panel, and then weld the bulkhead panel back in place. And that has to be done on both sides. So we're definitely right to come inside and cut open the section inside, because as you can see there's 2 MIG welds there, one on the left, one on the right, and the one on the right is cracked all the way through the MIG weld, and cracks going out either side, fore and aft direction, and there's also brown corrosion in there. So remove those 2 affected MIG welds. Well, the right one, it was definitely cracked through it. You can still see the crack through it, and I've located the ends of the cracks and chased the cracks and stop drilled the ends of them. And now we're going to weld new MIG weld to hold the inner central sleeve to this upper panel, which is affected and cracked, and then we'll weld the cracks as well. So the welding's happened, 2 new MIG welds to hold them together, and then the crack's been welded as well. Not very good picture, I should have videoed this before putting etch primer on it, but we've got some etch primer just drying now, and then I can close the cavity off shortly with the new cover panel. There's the cover plate, well not the cover plate, the bulkhead section welded back on all the way around the perimeter, and the original 2 weld points down there. So that puts that back to standard. We can put some primer on that later. And then over on the other side, again we were right to open this access open. So we've got a MIG weld there which is cracked, and another MIG weld there. That looks okay at the moment. But yeah, the cracks were definitely there internally, and without doing this invasive procedure they would have been still there and possibly growing, even though you'd have reinforcement plates underneath the car. The inside would have been affected, so it's definitely a good process to do the insides as well. So once cleaning off, there is a little bit of a hairline crack coming out of the right hand side MIG weld, but you can almost understand why they crack, because these are 2 MIG welds probably applied by humans, at the factory to join the two layers together, and you regularly see it with a gap, a parallel gap down one side. For some reason they never seem to go all the way over the pre-laser cut elongated hole. But look at the gap around this MIG weld up here at the top, and that should be going a lot more forward onto that section like this one is, and yet it curves off to the right. That's the new welds to replace the old MIG welds and also cover the cracks that we found. That's it, the bulkhead sections are repaired now. We've left little access panels so we can cavity wax behind in there. It's had some etch primer, a high build primer and a light dust and Vestral blue just to blend in roughly. Once we take all the covers off, that should look fairly nice, and then we can start putting the interior back together. This one is interesting, the right rear mount. I centre punched the crack that I could see through the sealer, and then delicately taking the sealer off, you can see how far the crack had travelled in the metal underneath the sealer that wasn't visible yet, and that hadn't broke through to show corrosion. So now we'll have to find the end of that crack and stop drill that one. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm using a natural crack, which is a semicircle crack going around this mounting point. I'm using one side of that as a breakout for removing this outer layer of skin, and then I'm drilling 8mm stop drill or spot weld holes and then connecting them up with a very, very thin slit, not to go through the back layer and try not to go past the circular holes, and then they simply are allowing the breakaway of this outer panel using the natural crack, which also proves it was a semicircle crack there, because one side is my cut straight line and the other side is the crack, and then these sections can come out, which is about a 1.2mm cheap panel section, which is the problem. This is the thin flimsy skin which is breaking, and now we can see the threaded platform behind, and we're going to penetrate our weld into that platform and then puddle connect it to these outer layers. So not only does that repair the cracked problem, but it also strengthens the connection from the inner threaded mount to this outer skin. So nobody else is doing this. This is quite unique. We've been doing it for nearly 2 years now, and still plenty of people could copy and pick up on the improvements we're doing, but it is time consuming. Nobody really wants to get involved with it by the seam of it, and we're also able to remove corrosion as best as possible and make much more of a positive connection. And that's just one way of connecting the inner to the outer. Once we get the reinforcement plates on, then we'll also do a 3-layer connection to the inner platform, the outer skin and the reinforcement plate. Just some of the initial crack repair welding's taken place now. Just quickly show you. There's 3 interesting things I've got to show. So this is the connection and spot weld repair work even before we attend to the main crack. And there's an interesting splinter crack shooting off on the left angle. You might just see underneath that stop drill. That stop drill was at the end because the crack was going up that way, and now there's another crack showing because of the heat from the welding. It's expanded the metal and showing there's a crack going off in that direction, only about 3mm long. So we'll do another stop drill up here and make sure that doesn't travel anymore. Then we can get to the actual main job of repairing the crack. What else? The crack repair for that side has happened, and then the 2 other spot welds down here that had failed have been drilled out, so we can plug weld those and connect the inner to the outer. A couple there that had failed with cracks on them, we've done that. This one, it's not a great example, but the crack is so small now that scratching has happened to take off the paint and the E-coat, so we never use any sort of sanding or flap disc or grinding equipment because that would thin the metal. This is just a tool that scratches the metal to make it bare metal, and if you hadn't have stop drilled the ends of the cracks when you located them, look at there's hardly any visual crack between that stop drill and that stop drill, so it would be easy to miss a crack if these drills weren't there, and then have some plates on there, but yet there'd still be a crack that's at risk of movement. And also in our exploratory, we've noticed that there is a crack occurring, or multiple cracks, on the actual rear axle carrier panel, away from the plated mounting points. Here's one spot weld on the left hand side, which is nice and round and still fine, and here's the other one which we've just started uncovering the seam sealer on, and you can already see it's got a crack going around the left hand side of that spot weld and a little bit coming out on the right hand side as well. So we'll have to take the sealer off in that area, stop drill those and drill that spot weld out and replace it with a plug weld, and then check the rest of them going down this area towards the front of the car. And then we've got exactly the same in the left side stitch area, a full spot weld crack and separation on that spot weld. That one's also gone, but it's not so obvious. So I've drilled out the affected spot weld there, and then taken out more material without damaging the panel, so I can plug weld connect the two panels together to solve that cracking problem. And then also found another small hairline crack coming out of a spot weld, that spot weld in the centre going over to the left. So I've stop drilled the end of it in an 8mm rather than a 2, and then also I can connect the two panels together better and then weld over the crack in the middle. So we're using a weld-through primer on the back of the reinforcement plates and also on the vehicle itself to make sure there's no bare metal, and that's a really important thing. If that's not being done, then you're at risk of trapping bare metal and who knows, maybe some moisture behind the plates, which you definitely don't want. So weld-through primer, very important. So all the reinforcement and the welding work's now finished. That's the right rear plate, left rear plate. Sounds a bit dark on this actually. Left front and right front and the little spacer plates. And now it's been fully degreased and de-ironed, so there's no iron particles or metal filings anywhere. Everything's air dried, and now we're going to go for the etch primer process. So that's the first stage of the paint protection process, and that's the etch primer, which is drying under the infrared lights. So it's had the stage 2 of the paint protect process, which is now high build primer in grey. So all of the rear axle carrier panel, and then all the other panels that we haven't worked on but have degreased and removed corrosion on. So the seat panel, the rear trailing arm pockets, the wheel arches, battery box, and going out into the boot floor or spare wheel panel. Next up is the paint colour and sealer application. Sealer and body colour Astral Blue paint. Now the sun's gone in here because we're doing this before we leave at the very end of the day, so we can make sure it dries overnight and we don't need to touch it whilst it's drying, and then we come back in the morning when it'll be a lot brighter and I'll do a new video just to show the true sort of Astral Blue colour, and then we can start the build up. Here it is in the daylight after it's dried overnight. So it's the Astral Blue body colour finish on this E46 M3 Convertible rear axle carrier panel, and as you can see we've gone out to the rear trailing arm pockets, seat panel, into the wheel arches, battery box, and right to the back of the boot floor or spare wheel panel. And we just start fitting things up. So we've got so everything gets cleaned as well, nothing gets sprayed over, whether it be a grommet, a clip, a brake pipe, carbon canister system with all its pipe work. And then we take a lot of care and attention on the build up, so we'll clean all of these pipes and get the wax off them and all the dirt. That's why they're literally squeaky clean. And we'll either replace pipe and replace clip points or just clean them if they're good enough, like in this case. Right out to the bodywork, out to the arches should I say. Stupidly durable. You can rub and rub and rub and pick this off, pick it, and it won't come off. We don't use any sort of cheap, sticky, paint on, brush on, wax oil, nothing like that. It's a proper automotive body shop paints. Leave an amazing textured finish with the seam sealer. Also really good corrosion protection with our proven methods over the years of our etch primer, high build primer, sprayable seam sealers, body colour paints, and then sometimes as well customers might spec a clear coat lacquer to be applied on top. So just give you an idea of what we do. Quick walk round. Cavity wax as well behind all the plates. Take all of these grommets out and wax all through. Make sure all the backs of the plates are covered, and on the rear ones as well. So this is the arch that we seam weld down here, stitch weld. So that seam sealer has been taken off, and then the join's been welded together, flushed and shaped, and then sealer and paint applied. So on a quick glance, if you didn't really know what you're looking at, you wouldn't necessarily know that that has been worked on. Plug welds where we had a failed spot weld up there, and also another one up in the corner up here. So spring turrets, or the spring perches, looking good. Had corrosion on the ends, as did some of the brackets, just surface corrosion, so we'll take that off. This was a fairly clean one, wasn't suffering from much corrosion. Some cars have got lots of corrosion up in the trailing arm pockets, and then we have to spend more labour time if the customer wants that. Some people don't want the paint that special, they just want the rear axle carrier panel painted, and then some people like this will say, yeah, whilst you've got it all stripped down, let's have a few more hours degreasing more panels, especially into the wheel arches. That's a real popular one because everybody likes a clean wheel arch, and you can just jet wash that for years and nothing's going to come off. The paint will be great, and any sort of mud that collects there will just blast off. And battery box as well, or battery tray. So we're going to carry on with the cleaning process and cleaning the components as we're fitting them, and then build them back up. Time for the fuel tank to go in. We're giving it a little clean. It's a bit dusty. We're putting the all important foam pads on, which just sit there. Normally they're glued on from factory, but a lot of the cars are missing them. This one was on, but it was somehow migrated its way over there. This one there was missing, and that is where it had been touching the chassis and rubbed through and caused a lot of corrosion up in that area there, which is why we've removed the corrosion and then also heavily waxed that area. So we have spare ones of these, so we're going to put that one on there, make sure that that tank doesn't rub or touch the chassis. There is with the fuel tank installed and the fuel system complete with the filling tubes, filling neck and the evaporation box. We just need to connect the pipework to that up there. And we've waxed the brake pipes behind the fuel tank before that went in, and we also waxed the brake pipes that are on the top of the rear axle carrier panel, so they're just about to be hidden by the rear axle assembly now. So we do that before it goes in so we can get good access, and then the ends of the joints will heavily wax those once we've connected the flexible hoses to them. And then you can also just see in the distance the important foam pads I was just talking about to make sure that the tank doesn't rub on the chassis. Might just be able to see one in there, protecting that chassis in that area. So the axle's on the jig now, ready to go back in. And we've done a bit of work on this as well, so it's had new BMW rubber subframe bushes, all 4 of those. Diff oil seal for the right hand side. What else have we done? We've done brake securing clips for these flexi pipes. It already had trailing arm bushes once before, so they don't need doing. And there's other bits and bobs we've been doing on the exhaust and the rest of the car, which we'll highlight a bit later on. So the work's now finished on this E46 M3. You just see the nice body colour blue, estral blue in the background. Now all the axle and the exhaust and panel work's fitted on, back on again. So as well as the repair and reinforcement process that we've done, you can just see an outline of one of the plates there, the left rear mounting point plate. There's a right rear over there above that subframe mount. There's a right front in the distance, just behind that fuel filler neck. And also a left front up in the distance behind that front axle. over there. So we've cavity waxed behind those. We've also done some extra reinforcement work inside the front seat section, as you saw in the video previously. And then this customer has also specified a little bit extra labour to go out into the wheel arches, so it's body colour all the way out there, full degrease, along with the battery box, battery tray, rear trailing arm pockets up in there, and into the boot floor section, which is above this rear silencer here. So if you're wondering what all that mark is, that's dirt where the car's already been on road test. It's on its 14-mile road test, and already you can see that just normal dirt has been splashed up there, but luckily that comes off nice and easy because this is an ultra durable finish. So as well as that, we've also done the rear subframe bushes, BMW rubber, 4 genuine BMW rubber subframe bushes, a right diff oil seal, and cleaned that leak up that was coming out of that right output flange, new BMW seal in there, prop shaft rubber coupling up on the front of the prop shaft at the rear of the gearbox, a new BMW item in there, and also a new gasket on the CV joint at the back of the prop. Rear exhaust metal clamps, these are the pair that normally break and corrode, so there's a pair of new clamps and a BMW gasket on there. 2 rear rubber mounts which are up here, along with new BMW copper nuts. Centre exhaust heat shield, so this is the item here where some of the bolts always break off, so 4 new bolts welded on and new fixings, and the heat shield cleaned, and new nylock nuts to secure that heat shield on in place. Centre exhaust nuts and bolts, correct bolts and nuts from BMW, which are copper in colour. Right front steering tie rod, so this one was seized, so we couldn't adjust the front toe. We took that unit off and put it in a vise, and steel couldn't undo it even with localized heat, so I had to have a new tie rod, inner and outer. And we got the BMW clip points here, new clips from BMW, and also we separate these 2 parts as well, make sure there's nickel anti-seize paste in there so that we know it will always undo in years to come. We've also installed engine drive belts, the main poly V belt and the air conditioning drive belt, as they were a bit cracked. Front xenon drop link sensor wasn't clipped in, but we've managed to clip that in okay, so we don't need to replace that at the moment. We thought the engine had an oil leak because there was oil down the back of the sump. We could see that the constant pressure valve looked fairly fresh up there, so we've cleaned all the oil off. So it's bone dry now, the sump and the gearbox and the front cross member, the steering rack and the aluminium tray, because all that was covered in oil. We've run the engine up and heat cycled it several times and we can't find any leak at the moment. So we do believe that was just old oil after another garage replaced the CPV quite recently. So good news is I don't think there is an engine oil leak there. Nice to check it properly and clean it all off. Fuel filter plastic under tray was damaged and not clipped in, so a new one of those from BMW because it wasn't sitting flat. Rear brake pipe flexies didn't have the securing clips in there, so we've put new BMW clips and straightened out the pipes because they were a little bit twisted. ABS wiring was routed incorrectly. We've put the clips in on that side in the right place. Left rear plastic under tray for the fuel tank was broken off up at this point up here. So rather than cable tie that, we put a new item from BMW. Some of the under trays didn't have all their fixings in. There wasn't a fixing on this right rear under tray, so we've made sure that's now got one on. We've painted the brake pipes, so we've removed any localized corrosion, painted those in black gloss, and then also waxed them with transparent wax, so they look nice and fresh at the moment, but they have got a good coating of wax on there, which is what some of that white material is. So we know that they'll always come undone, and they'll also never corrode at the MOT stage. Lambda probe wiring was incorrectly secured, so we've now put that in to its little clipping points on the heat shields. The V-brace was missing a centre bolt, so we've put a new BMW V-brace bolt in there and torqued that correctly. Front under tray aluminium brackets were quite bent, and also the front points were broken off, so the front fixings didn't have anything to go into, so we've put 2 new aluminium under tray hangers in. And I think that is it. But pretty much covers everything. So a lot of it was just clips and small items, just to improve the longevity of this vehicle, and that is now fully fixed, ready to go back to the customer. And that's it completed now. We've done a 14-mile road test. It's had the repair and reinforcement process with the extended pre-large paint and a whole host of other new items, bushes and fixings, and just little finishing touches and tweaks to improve the whole car's finish, and that is ready to go back to the customer.